The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
I mean, I'll tell you, man, you hit the holy grail with that video. That really went viral. That absolutely is the definition of going viral. All right, listen, everybody. Pay attention. Stop what you're doing, because you are going to want to listen to this. And what is incredibly cool about this is this kind of came about very organically, but we've got the pleasure today, or I've got the pleasure, and you guys have the pleasure of listening to it. But Rich Siegel is a guy that over the past couple months has gone viral on the internet with his activism in regards to the ongoing situation in Gaza between the Israelis and the Palestinians. You guys know I've talked about this a ton, but what we've got today is Rich, who is Jewish, and we are here to kind of hear your take on things, man. So welcome to the Deep Shallow Dive. It's seriously awesome to have you here.
Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, let's start with, give us the background. Obviously, you're Jewish. How did you grow up, and what was your family life like as being Jewish? And then when did you, I don't even want to say have a change of anything. I just want to understand, like, when you started to, I guess, maybe figure out your truth, and then help us understand, what that kind of is.
Well, I was raised in a Reform synagogue. My parents were actually founding members of that synagogue. It's a Bethlehem Temple in Pearl River, New York. And I call it like atheistic Zionism posing as Judaism. A lot of the members were atheists, and that brings up this whole conflict about what is an atheist Jew, since Judaism is all about believing in one God. Well, basically, I think, and this can be taken as a criticism of Judaism, although let me state right from the beginning that Judaism is not Zionism. Zionism is not Judaism. Judaism actually forbids Zionism, and that's a fact, but a lot of Jews don't understand that. However, Judaism is so focused on the Jewish tribe that it's very easy for the Jewish tribe to become an idol and to be worshipped instead of worshiping one God. And I believe the state of Israel is another such idol. So I was raised in a synagogue where people showed up for services, and we went to Hebrew school and had a bar mitzvah, everything else, where, God was mentioned, but not in a sincere way. Okay, so it was really all about being Jewish and supporting Israel. And, I bought all of it. I was, you believe what you're told when you're a kid. I actually had a really tough time growing up because I grew up in Pearl River, New York, which is a really racist town. So I experienced quite a bit of anti-Semitism growing up. Starting when I was like 7 years old, a little girl asked me, she said, "My father told me you killed Jesus." I said, "I never killed anybody," Then by the time I was in the 9th grade, there were kids throwing pennies at me saying, "Pick it up, Jew boy," that kind of thing. And that same year, somebody put a little note in my locker that said, "We're putting you in the ovens next." And I brought that note home, and my parents said, "Shit, we're moving." And we moved. And I should also say that Pearl River, New York is still a really racist town. Very recently, they had the high school had a basketball game where they were playing a team that had a lot of black players. And members of the Pearl River audience were making jungle noises and whatnot. So these are the grandkids of the racists that I grew up with, and they're raising their grandkids, their kids, and then their grandkids are just as racist as ever. So that's the town that I grew up in. But then, I experienced Jewish racism on the other side because, for example, I went I used to go to visit an elderly aunt who was at an Orthodox Jewish nursing home. And we encountered Orthodox Jewish kids there, and they weren't allowed to play with my brother and me because we weren't Orthodox, so we were Goyim, all right? So on the one hand, I was like hated for being Jewish, and then on the other, I was hated for not being Jewish enough, you know?
Okay. So like Orthodox Jews, is that like the strictest level of true Judaism to the religion, or like what do Orthodox believe that I guess Reformed Jews don't believe? And then there's also like a conservative layer, right?
Right. Okay. So just to describe that briefly, up until about 1780, there was only Orthodox Judaism. There wasn't anything else. And then the Reform movement came in, and that started in Germany, that moved to the United States. And subsequent to that, took about 100 years, but subsequent to that, the conservative movement started to kind of split the difference between Orthodox Judaism and Reform Judaism, because they felt that Reform Judaism went too far. Okay, so really, Orthodox Judaism is Judaism, and everything else is kind of like a secular compromise on Judaism, you know, depending on how far you want to make that compromise.
Okay.
And
That makes sense. That makes sense. When you said earlier, growing up, you were told a certain thing and you believed it because you were a kid. What was that you were told? Because I feel like if we can understand that initially, that's a good basis for really understanding what an entire generation of Jewish people from really the age of, let's say, 30 to 70 were told. So what was that you guys were
much more than a generation. I mean, I think many generations or several generations. But I mean, what I was referring to when I said that was this idea that, you know, you can go to a synagogue and worship the Jewish tribe and the Jewish state without worshiping God. I mean, that was presented to me. I accepted it because that's how it was presented to me. But I think what you're referring to when you're asking the question is, you know, what was I led to believe about Israel, about Zionism in Israel? And so I can be real specific about that. And what I was led to believe was that basically being Jewish means automatically being hated for no reason. Okay, like everybody hates us for no reason, and we can't trust anybody. And you can trust a non-Jew up to a point, but there's a point that they're going to call you a dirty Jew. Okay, this is child abuse. This is a very sick way to raise kids. It is how I was raised, and I want to, before I forget, credit my parents with having changed their minds in the meantime. They grew up when I grew up. Okay, but they believed this nonsense when, and I believed it as a result. So, specific to Israel, what that is interpreted as is that we Jews needed a homeland because everybody in Europe hated us. And we went back to our ancestral homeland intending to be good neighbors to the nice Arabs who were already there. And that didn't happen because they hate us for no reason, just like everybody hates us for no reason. And when we established the Jewish state, they all declared war on us and all bullied up on us, and they were going to drive us into the sea. And they told their people to evacuate while they drove us into the sea, and then they would return later. It's a completely absurd story, even from a military strategy point of view. It makes no sense at all. Okay, it didn't happen. But I mean, that's what I was told, and that's what I believed. And you know, you tend to think of the people that nurtured and raised you as being basically good, even if they weren't. And I did, and I believed that story. And you know, I want to say one more specific thing about my childhood from the Jewish hate point of view, because I think it's important. That is, after my parents moved, and we actually left Pearl River, New York, and went to Spring Valley, New York, which had a much more mixed population. It had more Jews and it had black people and other minorities, whereas Pearl River was just all Irish and Italian, basically. So we're in Spring Valley, and now I'm very involved in Zionism. I'm president of a Zionist youth group, and our adult counselors, sponsors, the people from the congregation. Actually, it was a different congregation. I was a member of a Zionist youth group in my synagogue, and then I was president of the Zionist youth group at my friend's synagogue. So at that synagogue, so we're having our meeting in the basement of the synagogue, and the parents, the adults from the synagogue, bring in lyric sheets of popular songs where they had changed the lyrics into Zionist lyrics. And they had us singing about killing Arabs, okay? So now I want you to picture me at age like 16 and a bunch of other Jewish 16, 17-year-olds, 15, whatever. And we're all in the basement of a synagogue, which is ostensibly a house of God. And we're singing about killing Arabs. And I think that was my first inkling that something was wrong. You know, it was like, do I really want to sing about killing people? And, you know, then the answer that I came up with in my own head was, well, these adults are in charge of us and they are giving us this stuff to do. So it must be okay. And of course, it wasn't okay. And it was more child abuse and it was more racism. And it was my first dose of what Zionism really is, which is Jewish supremacy. And
yeah, let's get into that, because honestly, I feel like I have access to a historian to many aspects with you. You know, this term Zionism, it really is everywhere now, and I feel like they've let something out of Pandora's box that maybe has been hidden for a long time. But help us understand what that is. How did it start? Who started it? And what is Zionism? And then once you take us through that, maybe we can separate it from Judaism if you feel there is a separation.
Oh, there's absolutely a separation. Okay, so first, just a little commentary on that. And that is that what I'm about to say is actually very simple. And when you have a conversation with Zionists, they try to convince you that it's very complicated. And that's an intimidation tactic, okay? They try to make you feel that, like, well, if you're not Jewish, you couldn't possibly understand, okay? And not only is it because you're not Jewish, but you don't know the history the way I do, because my family lived it and I was raised with it. So, you know, Mr. Italian American, Irish American, black person, whoever you are, you know, shut up, you don't know. Guess what? You do know, because it's real simple. And here it is. Zionism is a political agenda, and as such, it is not Judaism. Judaism is a religion, okay? Political agenda, religion, different, okay? Zionism was a political agenda that was in the air in the late 19th century, but it was codified by a guy named Theodor Herzl in a book he wrote called Der Judenstaat, which is German for the German state. He wrote that book in 1895. In 1897, there was the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. You can put that as the beginning date of the movement. That was their first meeting, okay? What Zionism is, it's the political agenda to have a Jewish state in historic Palestine.
Okay.
And part of that agenda was the removal of the non-Jewish population. That was part of the agenda from the beginning, from Herzl's book through the entire pre-state period, where the government at that time of the Jewish community was known as the Yeshuv, and they had a committee in place that was studying the native population. It was for later transfer, and that ethnic cleansing happened in a big way in 1948. So before statehood, Zionism was the agenda to make this Jewish state in historic Palestine.
And why historic Palestine? Why there?
Well, actually, other places were considered. but Zion actually refers to that land, so it couldn't really be Zionism if it wasn't that land. And Palestine is the place where the Jewish religion started.
Okay.
And it's also an extremely important place in Christianity and in Islam. So it's very important for all three Abrahamic faiths. But the Jewish religion, and this is where Judaism and Zionism intersect, but they are not the same, okay? So Judaism talks about our exile from this land, okay? And then Judaism is all about a Messiah coming eventually, which is always in the future. It's like he's not coming any minute.
Yeah.
So way in the future, when we behave ourselves well enough to merit it, the Messiah will come and our exile will end. Now, supposedly we're in exile from that land, and that happened at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. The only problem is that this is historically inaccurate because there was no exile, okay? If some of the Jewish elite were kicked out at that time, maybe that's true. But the vast majority of the ancient Judean population or Israelite population at that time remained in place, and their descendants are the Palestinian Muslims and Christians today. They are descended from the ancient Jews. I am not. I'm descended from European converts to Judaism. Do I have any of the ancient blood in me? Maybe. But clearly I'm a white European, and we're descended from converts to Judaism in Europe. But
okay. All right. So so that Messiah that's coming, that's not Jesus though, right? Like according to Christians, I think their Messiah is Jesus Christ. But according to Judaism, who is that Messiah? Because it's not Jesus, is it?
Okay, right. So basically, the fact that Judaism has this Messiah figure has attracted many alleged messiahs through the centuries, okay? And for one reason or another, they've all been determined to be false messiahs. And I'm not taking sides here, but Judaism does not accept Jesus Christ as Messiah. Christianity is a religion that is built around Jesus Christ as Messiah. And that's where that split takes place.
Okay.
So Jews are still waiting for the Messiah.
Okay, but they don't really have a name for that person. They don't know who that is. Okay. Oh, that's
no, they don't know who that is. I mean, there's one sect, the Chabad Lubavitchers, who believe that a rabbi that they had who was recently deceased is the Messiah. But once again, most Jews are going to reject that.
Okay. And then the Orthodox Jews, or even the ultra-Orthodox, like hardcore ones, so do they think right now they don't even belong in Israel, or that Israel is not theirs until that quote unquote Messiah comes? Is that how it works?
All right. So yes and no. So basically, at the beginning of the Zionist movement, so you have to understand that I've already explained that there's such a thing called an atheist Jew, even though that sounds like an oxymoron. And the Zionist movement started out as a movement by atheist Jews. And at the beginning, it was totally rejected by all Orthodox Jews, 100%. And a lot of Orthodox Jews today deny that, but it's just a fact. So Judaism categorically rejects Zionism. Judaism says that we return from exile when the Messiah comes. The Messiah has not come, so we don't return, okay? But what happened was in the 1920s, there was an Orthodox rabbi, and his name was Koch, K-O-O-K. And he proclaimed that even though the Messiah had not yet come, we have entered into the Messianic era, okay? So this is the way that some actually many Orthodox Jews feel that they can fool God on this issue by saying, okay, we're now in the Messianic era, therefore we can join up with the atheist Zionists that we used to say we hate. So now, today, there are many, many Orthodox Jews who are Zionists, especially the modern Orthodox, who are the large community in my town in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Mhm.
And there are many, many Orthodox Jews who continue to reject Zionism. And they are they are very, very much at odds with each other. They abhor each other. They can't stand each other. So, but that's how it is.
That's interesting because I mean I see a ton of videos on Instagram, especially where I guess it's the Torah Jews, Torah, and I might be pronouncing that wrong.
No, that's
The ones
correct.
with the hats, and maybe the side curls and all that. They
Right.
seem like they are totally against Zionism.
Okay.
Am I
So
interpreting that correctly?
that particular group is, and
Okay.
they are the Neturei Karta rabbis, who I believe are a subgroup of the Satmar sect, and they are anti-Zionists. Now, but because you just called them Torah Jews, I have to explain what that means. Okay, so the Torah
Mhm.
the Torah is the first 5 books of the Jewish Bible, the 5 books of Moses. That's the Torah.
Okay.
But Torah, as a more inclusive term, means the totality of all Jewish scripture, including the entire Jewish Bible and the Talmud, which is 2 Talmuds, the Babylonian and the Jerusalem, and including other writings as well. So when they talk about themselves as being true Torah Jews, what they mean is that they are the ones who have the correct interpretation of Jewish scripture. Okay. And what that also means is that the Zionist Jews have the incorrect interpretation. And, I'm not an Orthodox Jew myself, obviously, but knowing as much as I do about Judaism, I agree with that assessment. The
Okay.
Torah absolutely forbids Zionism.
Okay, got it. Okay, so the Zionist movement started in 1897. I do know Theodore Herzl is obviously kind of the founder of that. So take us
Correct.
through like the Balfour Declaration from 1917 and then into 1948 and kind of what took place there.
Okay. So basically, settlement began after this first Zionist Congress in 1897. I think the first major settlement activity was in 1906. So in 1917, that's the Balfour Declaration, and that is when British MP named Balfour wrote a promissory letter to Lord Rothschild, promising a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And part of that promise was that it should not affect the native Arab population adversely. So there are stories about this which may or may not be true, that it was a deal by which President Wilson brought America into World War I on the side of the British, that the Balfour Declaration was presented to the Jewish community for having influenced President Wilson to do that. That's a theory. I'm
Okay.
not going to confirm or deny it. But basically, Balfour had no right to promise Palestine to anyone. And at the same time, they were making contradictory promises to the Arabs. World War I was in process at that time. Palestine was still part of the Ottoman Empire, but Great Britain intended conquest, and they achieved conquest. And from that point on, the expectation was that they follow through on it and aid the Jews in establishing a homeland in Palestine.
Okay.
So the history between the Balfour Declaration and 1948 statehood is pretty complicated because the British were seen as betraying both the Arabs and the Zionists at different points. I don't want to get too specific, but it all led up to the 1948 ethnic cleansing and statehood. And very specifically, the main event leading up to that was the 1948 UN resolution. And a lot of people are under the impression that the United Nations created the state of Israel, and they absolutely did not do that. And the United Nations does not create states. But what the United Nations did was they passed a non-binding resolution recommending partition of Palestine, giving more than 50% to the Zionists and less than 50% to the Palestinians. And partition of Palestine at all was a violation of the UN's charter, because the UN's charter guarantees the rights of self-determination to majority populations. The majority population in Palestine were the Arab population, the Muslims and Christians and Jews too. But the Arab population was totally against partition of Palestine, and that includes the Jews. And so they violated their own charter when they passed this resolution. It was a non-binding resolution, but it was taken by the Zionists to be a victory. And immediately after that UN resolution was passed, Zionist terrorists began depopulating Palestinian villages in what has become known as the Nakba. And that continued through 1948 and into 1949. And that is when over 500 Palestinian villages were liquidated, eliminated, towns and villages. And there were 30 documented massacres. And over 750,000 people became homeless, became refugees. Wow. And the state of Israel was established in the middle of all that. The state was established on May 14th, 1948, while this Nakba was raging.
Wow.
And this, incidentally, this was the real shock to me to find out. Because, when I was a kid, there was absolutely no mention of this. And the whole idea, now, we knew that there were Jewish terrorists, okay, because there was the bombing of the King David Hotel in 1946, and that was a gesture by Jewish terrorists against the British at that time, okay? So we knew that these terrorist groups existed, but we thought that they were primarily focused on the British. And I was taught that we did nothing wrong to get this state. So this entire history was hidden from me. And of course, as I mentioned, I was a Zionist youth group president. So I was very active. And, in my early 20s, I actually lived and worked in Israel and was, on track to become Israeli. And I did so. I was in that position simply because I was lied to all my life. And this is really the source of my anger, because I feel like I was the driver of a getaway car and nobody told me they robbed the bank. Wow. This is the feeling that I have, that I contributed to this crime against humanity, even in a very small way, because nobody told me that crime existed. I was just presented with a whole schema of lies that so many people still believe. And it's really interesting to see this, because the information is available. The information is out there. When I was a kid, it wasn't. There have been. It all started with this group of Jewish Israeli historians, revisionist historians, who used declassified IDF documents to show that the history that we were all taught was a bunch of lies, and to expose the Nakba, expose Zionist crimes against humanity. So when I was a kid, this information wasn't available, but it's absolutely available now. And
Yeah.
that's why I don't understand why people don't have it. I don't understand why my Jewish people still cling to the lies that have been debunked for decades at this point.
And so you were in your early 20s when, I don't know, your light bulb went off and you're like, holy shit, this is, or younger.
It happened more gradually. It actually happened for me in two stages. And, for me, the first thing that happened was I had a spiritual experience. I came into a spontaneous awareness of God, and I know that I may be offending a lot of the atheists who are watching, and that's okay. I'm just telling my story.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what I realized was that the Jews who raised me were worshiping the state of Israel and were worshiping their tribal identity. And, I came into an awareness of something that was universal. I mean, there's one God, so there's one human race. So this worshiping of Jewish tribe and Jewish state was completely superfluous and actually quite damaging. So I embraced that. And, I went through the process of trying to find a Jewish place of worship where they actually paid attention to God, and I never found one. I would have if I had gone Orthodox, but I really don't want to wear a black hat and a black coat in the summertime. So I found my way to the New Thought movement, and I've been active in unity churches and centers for spiritual living for a very long time now. They may want to disown me at this point when they hear me talking against Zionism, because there are a lot of Zionist Jews who find a truer spirituality in the New Thought movement, but who still cling to Zionism and these twin idols that I mentioned. So
Got it.
For a long time, I had serious problems with the way I was raised, with this contradiction in atheistic Judaism, but I still believed the lies about Zionism. I still believed that we needed this place and that we were the good guys who just went there wanting to be good neighbors, and the bad Arabs just hated us for no reason, and they were going to drive us into the sea. I mean, it sounds absurd when I talk about it now. But when you have that drummed into you as a kid, I mean, I still believe that, getting into my early 40s, and at that point, I started really having misgivings about Zionism, because, the whole situation was just bad news after bad news after bad news. It was just intractable. And it was just like, it seemed to be the same thing over and over again. And I started to suspect that maybe these people who I have been told are my enemies, maybe they actually have a point of view. And I said, you know what? I'm going to hear their point of view. And I became open to hearing their point of view. And I fully expected to investigate their point of view, find out that it was bullshit, and go back to Zionism. That was my expectation.
Yeah.
And, it actually happened at a particular moment, because I decided I was open, and then all of a sudden literature became available. I had a gig up in Massachusetts, and one summer, and I was... my wife came up to visit me. I remember she was pregnant with our daughter at the time, and I went to the train station in Providence, Rhode Island, and a bunch of activists had a table out that had literature, and I said, okay, here's my chance, okay? So I picked up this literature, and I started reading. And I started reading about the massacre at Deir Yassin. I'm like, what? Jews massacring Arabs? I had never heard that. Maybe somebody had mentioned the battle at Deir Yassin. Massacre? So I went through this process, but what happened was, after I read all that stuff, it led me to like 8 years at least of nonstop reading, of research. And I read all of the Jewish Israeli revisionist historians, And then I read the Arab writers and the writers who were from neither camp. You know, there's some damn good historians of various ethnic backgrounds who write about this issue. And you know, I had to conclude the inevitable that if you're looking at writing that comes out of declassified IDF documents that talks about what they did, what they are admitting to having done in 1948, you got to kind of conclude that they did it.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, you know, a really monstrous crime against humanity that was the foundation of the state of Israel. Of course, you know, fast forward to 2023 and 24, the loss of life in Gaza actually exceeds the loss of life during the Nakba of 1948. And I got to tell you, I got a lump in my throat when I said that, and I'm like holding back tears because I hate this.
Yeah.
I really hate it. I hate it with all my soul. I've been active in this issue for over 20 years. I never could have imagined, and I think none of us could ever imagine the degree of depravity that Zionism and the state of Israel have sunk to, where they are committing a genocide and they are screaming anti-Semite at anybody who dares criticize it. And they're still calling the Palestinians terrorists while they're making up this bullshit about beheaded babies and serial rape that didn't happen. And they're still saying it like it happened. You know, it's a cult. And I'm a cult survivor.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I left that cult decades ago. And what's happening now is I'm looking back and I'm watching it become sicker than I ever imagined it could become. And I don't know what to do about it, so I'm here talking about it.
Oh, dude, it's deep, man. It's deep, and I feel your emotions. I mean, what do you think their end goal is? You know, what are they just?
I don't have to think about what their end goal is. Isn't it clear? The total ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
Yeah.
They want to take over Gaza and put in their Zionist beach resorts on the graves of 15,000 children. That's their end game.
And there's no religious in the Zionist mind. There's no religious thing to this. This is all just literally domination that will benefit financially.
Incorrect. And let me get into that. And I'm
Okay,
really
awesome.
glad that you made that mistake because I
am
think
too, actually.
your listeners need to hear this distinction, okay? So I did say that Judaism forbids Zionism, and I did say that starting with Rabbi Koch in the 1920s, Orthodox Judaism, some of Orthodox Judaism embraced Zionism. And what they have done subsequent to that is they have made it an integral part of their religion. And that goes for the Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist. And incidentally, the Conservative and Reconstructionists are both 100% Zionist. There are significant anti-Zionist factions among the Orthodox and even today among the Reform, okay? And among Jews who are just not members at all. There's a significant anti-Zionism. Now, let me explain how this manifests, and I'll do it by telling a story. The first time I organized a demonstration against an Israeli real estate event, and we can talk about that more later, was in 2007. So I've been doing this a long time. At that time, I pursued communications with the rabbi of the synagogue that was hosting that event. His name is Stephen Przansky, and he is now a resident of the state of Israel. He has made aliyah, which is how we say Jews leaving the United States or other places and going to Israel. They're stepping up. They're making aliyah. They're doing a holy thing by going to Israel, and they believe this. Now, when I had the conversation with Rabbi Przansky, first of all, he was willing to enter into conversation with me because he saw me as like a wayward Jewish son, and he felt he could bring me back into the fold. That didn't happen. But he made it a point to explain to me that when they were going to have this Israeli real estate event at his synagogue, they were not having it in the various catering rooms that they have there. This is a big synagogue. There's plenty of space for them to have a real estate event. But they weren't doing it in those spaces. He was intentionally having it in the sanctuary of the synagogue because, pay attention, because the redemption of the land is a religious duty. What does that mean?
Wow.
Because putting Jews on the land, which means getting rid of the Muslims and Christians, is a religious obligation, okay? So they absolutely see Zionism and the Judaization of this land as being integral to their Judaism, whereas it's an absolute perversion of their Judaism. They won't listen to me say it because I'm a secular Jew, and I've been excommunicated, by the way. And they won't listen to the Netrikar. They won't listen to the other Orthodox Jews who believe this because they believe that they're just nuts, okay? So they're in their own little hermetically sealed Zionist Jewish universe where they believe the religious justification of ethnically cleansing Palestine.
Okay, that was an excellent clarification. But it's almost like they rewrote the rules to the rules they want, right?
Seems that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does.
Well,
all right, let's go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
you
go ahead.
Say that Judaism actually has a history of Jews sidestepping rules to fool God, and there's an author that I like a lot. His name he's deceased. His name was Israel Shahak, and he wrote extensively about this, about Jews getting around. So, see, Judaism is all about law, and there are 613 of these laws. And it's kind of hard to live up to all of them. So there are ways that Jews through history have sidestepped a lot of these laws, thinking that they can fool God. And this is what they've done in Zionism. I mean, in the beginning, they all rejected Zionism. And Zionism was very attractive. It was like, oh, look, the atheist Jews that we call Goyim, the ones we don't even consider Jews, they've made this a Jewish land. It's for us. So let's change Judaism a little bit and justify going there. That's what they did.
Got it. All right, let's talk about, man, this is fascinating, by the way. Let's talk about, and by the way, actually, I do need to say this. Dude, you must be catching so much grief within the Jewish community. And it sounds like, a lot of people are being introduced to you because of the viral video, which we'll talk about in a second. But what I think people don't know, and actually I really want them to know, because, you didn't just start doing this in 2023. Like, you've been active in this space for 20 plus years now. I think that's important for people to understand that, because honestly, that's credibility.
Yeah. All of a sudden, this video went viral, and just a funny story about that.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
My daughter is a freshman at college, and I'm going to not say where. And some people, and she supports the Palestinians, and she actually attended a demonstration. And some friends of hers came up to her and said, "Hey, you got to see this guy in this video." And she looks at it. She didn't even know I was in this viral video, and she was like, "That's my dad."
Oh man, that's insane. That's insane. Yeah. All right. So how the hell did that video happen? Talk us through that.
Okay. So basically, I have been involved in organizing demonstrations against Zionist activity, mostly, in and around Teaneck, New Jersey, in Bergen County, New Jersey, for a long time. I've also attended a lot of demonstrations in New York City and in Washington, D.C., etc. But I don't organize in those places. I organize where I live. And I've organized various things, like there was in 2014 when Israel was bombing the shit out of Gaza at that time. There was a local rabbi who made a speech and said that anyone who voted for Hamas was a legitimate military target. So giving permission to kill people based on how they voted. So naturally, I organized a demonstration at his synagogue, time to go along with his Sabbath services. So that's just an example. But many times I have organized against Israeli real estate events. And let me describe exactly what these are. So there are Israeli real estate companies who tour the United States, Canada, and the UK. I know those for sure. They probably tour other places as well, in Western Europe, Australia, perhaps. And what they're doing is they're selling Israeli real estate directly to Jews in those locations. And in some cases, these Jews are going to actually move to Israel. In other cases, they're buying vacation homes. And included in that real estate are West Bank settlement homes. And West Bank settlement homes are illegal as per international law. Now, even the real estate that they're selling inside what we call Green Line Israel, even that real estate is red line real estate. It's real estate for Jews only. Okay. So
and Green Line Israel, for everyone's understanding, is, let's say, Israel proper minus Gaza and minus the West Bank.
And minus East Jerusalem. So the Green Line.
Okay.
Yeah. The Green Line is the line that was drawn on the map in 1949 at the conclusion of the Nakba.
Okay.
So that was what became the state of Israel at that time. And when people talk about a two-state solution, for example, when Jimmy Carter wrote his book and called for a two-state solution, they're talking about the state of Israel going back to those borders.
Okay.
And so everything outside of those borders, which includes, well, East Jerusalem is unique because East Jerusalem has been annexed by the state of Israel, but that is not recognized internationally. The West Bank is Palestinian territory. Gaza is Palestinian territory. So there has been settlement activity in all of those areas starting in 1967 when those areas were conquered during the Six-Day War. Now, and other areas were conquered as well. The Sinai, Egypt's Sinai was conquered, and Syria's Golan was conquered. Now, Egypt's Sinai was given back. Syria's Golan was not. So there are settlements in Syria's Golan as well. Okay. So,
and by the way, when you say settlements, we're talking about communities that are being built and only Israelis are allowed to live in those communities. Is that what a settlement is?
Absolutely. But let's be clear that in most of Israel, there are towns and villages and neighborhoods and cities where only Jews are allowed to live. Okay, so redlined real estate. I'm using an American term from back before we had civil rights. We had redline real estate. We had areas where real estate agents would not sell to black people, and literal red lines were drawn on the town's map. Okay, so basically, going back to that concept, Israel itself is loaded with redline real estate for Jews only. And West Bank settlements are for Jews only, okay? And Gaza used to have settlements, and up until 2005, the decision was made by Ariel Sharon in 2005 to evacuate the Gaza settlements. Okay. And that was done as kind of a PR stunt to look like goodwill, when actually, they did it because Gaza was a hornet's nest. And they did it as a smokescreen to provide cover for expansion of settlements in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. Okay, and probably, this is my conspiracy theory head at this point, but I think that they intended to do eventually, we're going back to 2005, 19 years, but I think they intended to eventually do exactly what they're doing now, which is to ethnically cleanse Gaza and take it over.
Got it. Got it. And so in 2005, they took all the settlers out of Gaza, but I've looked that up. That was only like 8,500 families, like, and that left 1.5 million at the time Palestinians there. But you know, that's an interesting. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's like, okay, wait a minute, that's like less than 1% of the population was Israeli anyway, so it's no major feat to bring them out of Gaza. But that's an
except that you don't know the settler mentality.
Oh, okay.
I mean, these people left kicking and screaming, and they intend to go back now. They're organized to go back now. They're organized. They're planning to go back.
Wow.
And back when Israel signed a peace agreement with Sadat in Egypt, okay, and gave the Sinai back to Egypt, there were settlements in occupied Sinai at that time, and they had to evacuate them. And those settlers left kicking and screaming because, you know, they're all right-wing Zionist fanatics and they all believe in a greater Israel and they want to take over the land.
Yeah. And that's the right-wing movement right now. Like is Netanyahu part of that right-wing movement? Is that what he's all about?
Well, he's not part of it. He's leading it.
He's leading it. Okay.
And he's, well, I mean, he's the leader of the entire nation, but it's certainly in tune with his ideology. Absolutely.
Okay.
He's not a settler himself, but you know.
No, I can understand the settlers kicking and screaming, but you know, Ariel Sharon at the time, I mean, that does make sense. He's like, hey, this is a hornet's nest. We don't really care about this for now anyway. We're going to ethnically cleanse this down the line anyway. Just get these guys out and let's focus on building more quietly in the West Bank.
That's exactly correct.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Talk to us about this event. So you were in Teaneck at a town hall meeting or a town council meeting, and then you basically made a speech.
Yeah. Well, here's what happened. So, you know, obviously that the world changed on October 7th.
Yeah.
And subsequent to October 7th, a couple of weeks later, our town council approved a pro-Israel resolution, which really pissed me off, and I emailed them. I had spoken in front of the town council years ago. Actually, one thing I didn't mention was that the Orthodox Jewish community volunteered our town to have a sister city relationship with a West Bank settlement. Wow. And I discovered this, and I went in front of the town council, and I said, this needs to end now. And it did, you know, because I brought it to the attention of the town, you know, whereas only the Orthodox Jews knew that, you know, that they had volunteered the town for this sister city relationship. So I had spoken in front of the town council before, but it had been a long time. You know, I sent them angry emails after they approved this pro-Israel resolution. And anyway, so months go by, and clearly there's a genocide going on. And then I find out that they're having another one of these Israeli real estate events. And I check, and sure enough, they're selling real estate in West Bank settlements, in addition to the real estate that they're promoting inside Green Line Israel. So I said, you know, I've really had enough of this, and, you know, sending them an email is not going to do it. So I went in front of the town council, and I spoke for 3 minutes, and I made the point that this event was planned. I made the point that it violated international law because the West Bank settlements violate international law. I made the point that it violates domestic anti-discrimination laws because the real estate being promoted is for Jews only, and we don't do that here. We don't have red line real estate here. And I said that I think I kind of sounded like a cowboy for a minute, because I said there's going to be a demonstration. And the reason I know there's going to be a demonstration is because I'm going to organize it. So I think I sounded pretty badass there. And so, well, okay, if I could toot my own horn. So
toot it, cowboy.
Anyway, yeah. So I spoke for 3 minutes, and then the next day, I have a next door neighbor here who is he's Pakistani, and he's a member of the local mosque. And what's happened a few times is that whenever I speak, people in the mosque notice it and they edit it and they distribute it among themselves. And so my neighbor, sends me a video that I didn't know anybody had. And he says, "Hey, that was a nice speech you made." And I'm like, "I didn't know anybody videotaped that." So he sent me that video the next day. And then I started hearing about the video from literally everybody,
Yeah.
And it got 2 million hits on Twitter, which I think is now called X.
That's right.
And
That's right.
now that we're all used to calling it Twitter. So it was a really good thing, because
that is officially viral, man. That thing, I think now, I tried to sum up the different places that I've seen it. I think that's well over 5 million views collectively now. So then that led to, did you then start getting contacted once that thing took off? You got contacted by all these other outlets?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some just put it on without contacting me at all. I mean, Amy Goodman, Democracy Now!, she ran it. Majority Report ran it. But I have been contacted by many journalists from many different countries. Actually, Al Jazeera sent a reporter down here to visit, and a cameraman, and I gave them what I call the Zionist tour of Teaneck, and they're doing a longer piece on me, which is being edited now.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Oh,
so
that's
a lot of good
deal.
things have happened, and then I was approached by some people from the Muslim community and asked to run for Congress, and so I am. I'm running for Congress.
You're running for Congress? Oh wow! I didn't even know that. That's amazing.
I probably should have mentioned that up front. Yeah, I'm running for Congress on the Ceasefire and Justice Party.
Okay.
I'm running to beat Josh Gottheimer, who is the among recipients of AIPAC money, he receives the second highest amount of anybody.
Wow.
And I have a particular interest in exposing Josh Gottheimer, because I think this is a story that will interest your listeners, so you'll forgive me for answering a question that wasn't asked.
Sorry.
But we're pals now, right?
Yeah. Oh God, we're totally.
I can wing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, wing away.
All right. So back in November, a group of Teaneck high school students, I think actually 2 young women in particular, and a group of their friends, they staged a walkout for Palestine. And let's just reflect for a moment on how remarkable that is, that couple of kids who are 15, 16 are exercising their First Amendment rights to express themselves on an issue that they feel is an emergency. And so they organized this walkout and march. And since I was not affiliated with Teaneck High School, I wasn't allowed to participate on the high school grounds, but they moved out to the main street, out to Teaneck Road. And I joined the demonstration at that point with many other residents and people from surrounding towns, and we had a big march. So the response to that was that our congressman, Josh Gottheimer, accused the kids of anti-Semitism and accused the school board of harboring anti-Semitism. And one of our council members, town council member Hillary Goldberg, did the same thing, and they tried to actually shut this event down. Now, if you can imagine, if there were kids that had staged a pro-Israel walkout. You think they would have shut that down?
No.
I mean, they would have been showering these kids with praise.
Yeah.
They tried to shut it down because it was an ideology that they disagreed with, you know? And so basically, what I feel about our congressman, this Josh Gottheimer, is that he's un-American. He doesn't believe in freedom of speech. He doesn't believe in our First Amendment, okay? There's a guy named Noam Chomsky, who I understand suffered a stroke today, and I'm very sorry to hear that. I don't know if he's okay or not. But he said something to the effect of, if we don't believe in freedom of speech for people we despise, we don't believe in it for anybody at all. Now, that may not be a word-for-word quote, but I absolutely captured the essence of it. In other words, you better respect my right to free speech, even if you don't agree with me, if you expect me to respect yours. And I think that's the American way. I think that's the way. It's the way of a free society.
No, it absolutely is. It absolutely is.
The Zionists don't want it, man.
Yeah. Well, you're seeing that in the House of Representatives. I mean, they passed the anti-Semitic bill in the House. I don't think it's going to get through the Senate.
Let's talk about that. Yeah. What a travesty that is, because they're equating Zionism with Judaism, and I just talked about how they're not the same thing.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you make the claim, and it's the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Okay, if you make the claim that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, then you're canceling my existence. You're canceling the existence of 2 million Orthodox anti-Zionist Jews. And you're canceling the existence of a similar number of anti-Zionist secular Jews.
Wow, the number's that big?
The numbers are definitely that
That's
big.
A big
Absolutely.
Number. Wow.
There's a huge community of anti-Zionist Orthodox Jews in New York.
Wow.
And an equally large number in Jerusalem. I was a guest at the home of the head rabbi of the Neturei Karta movement in Jerusalem. You go into this Neturei Karta neighborhood with all these black hat, black coat Orthodox Jews, and you see Palestinian flags everywhere.
Wow. That's amazing. Do you feel safe?
Jews.
Would you go to Israel now? Would you feel safe there?
No, I don't feel safe in Israel. I don't feel safe in Teaneck. I feel safe in Palestine. I feel safe among the Palestinians, absolutely. And I've toured Palestine openly as a Jew.
Yeah. Wow, that's insane.
And this is the funniest thing, because you know how Zionists like to argue. You know, basically they're masters of the ad hominem attack and the straw man and other devices, because they can't argue their point because they don't have one. Okay, so they love to say, just you go to Palestine and see what they do to you there.
Right.
And I say, I've been, and you know what happened to me? They served me lunch, and it was really good food. So, you know, they don't know the things I know because they live in their own little bubble and they believe their lies.
Well, you definitely bring receipts, man. You bring receipts. All right, let me ask you this question, because now we're off script and we're just riffing. What do you think happened October 7th? Like, what do you think that was?
Man, you know, so the caveat here is that I'm no expert, okay? So, whatever I say about this, now, when I talk about history, I know what I'm talking about. So we're moving into an area where I admit that I don't, okay? Here's what we know. We know that basically that there are huge defensive systems around the Gaza border, and they were disassembled. They were moved out, okay? We know that a music festival had its location changed, okay? We know that Hamas had a very easy time entering, okay? We know that the beheaded babies in serial rape and children bundled up in groups of 10 and set on fire, that's all a bunch of lies that were told by Zaka, the ambulance people. And we know that many of the Israelis who were killed by friendly fire. They were shot at by Israeli helicopters. Okay, so that we know all of those things. Okay, what does that all add up to? Does it make the whole thing a false flag operation? Does it make it a Hamas operation that Israeli intelligence knew about in advance? You tell me. I mean, because I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not what we've been told about on the news. Okay, it's definitely not, some barbarians, chopping the heads off babies. Okay, that didn't happen. Okay, something big did happen. We know that, and it changed the world. And
the question is, did it happen on purpose? Obviously in Israel prior to that, and again, I think I'd love for you to speak on this. The judicial reforms that were taking place, that Netanyahu was trying to gain more power. I mean, I know that was a huge deal. I think Netanyahu himself was on trial for 3 either civil or criminal things. So, talk to us about that stuff that was before October 7th.
And again, I mean, you need to have John Mearsheimer on because he's a political scientist. He's the guy who can really talk this stuff. Okay, from my understanding, basically, Netanyahu has become a pariah. The minute this war ends, he's definitely out of office and maybe in jail. Okay, so he's keeping this thing going, to maintain himself as some kind of hero general in the eyes of the Israeli public. And that's really all I can say about it. I'm just not privy to the inner workings of the Israeli government enough to say.
Okay. No, that's fair. That's fair. All right, let's talk about, dude, so many good stuff. So how do you think this is going to end, actually? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I mean, what I know is that sooner or later, the values of the modern world are going to prevail, and there's going to be a free Palestine with equal rights for all. And that's what we're going for. How many people have to die in the meantime? I mean, how long does this tragedy have to persist in the meantime? I don't know. I mean, is Israel going to totally flatten and ethnically cleanse Gaza and build their Zionist beach resorts in the meantime? I don't know. But clearly, what's happening now is the people of the world are supporting the Palestinians. The elitists, the elite governments of the world, the elite, I mean, you call them what you want. I'm no expert on this either. But, there is a lot of elitist governmental and financial investment into Israel continuing as a pariah Jewish supremacist state. And in the meantime, many governments are moving away from that. I mean, we have many international governments who have recognized the state of Palestine before it actually comes into existence. So,
all right, man. Listen, I mean, anything else you want to talk about? I think this was great, and I think we really covered a lot of stuff. I mean, how do you feel about it? You feel like you got across what you want to get across?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if there's one thing that I didn't go into enough was maybe my process of well, I did mention that I read for 8 years to totally change my mind on the issue, but I didn't mention, being so amazed and appalled and horrified that I, got drunk and cried and went through all the emotional nonsense that one goes through when finding out that, you've been lied to your whole life.
What age was that? What age was that took place?
I was past 40, man.
Past 40.
I was middle age. Yeah. Yeah, I'm an old dude now. I'm past 60 at this point,
No, but I'm saying at that age, that's like getting cold water thrown in your face, and you're just like, holy shit, I've believed this. That's a long time. I thought you were in your 20s, but the fact that you were in your 40s. Yeah. And listen, I give you a lot of credit for being able to change at that age. I find a lot of people can't change their viewpoints at that age.
Well, I mean, it did happen to me in two steps. I mean, like I said, in my 20s, I came to see atheist Judaism as being kind of ridiculous
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
took on a spiritual focus in my life. But I still maintain this belief in, the Zionist hallucinations that I was taught. And then, I was past 40 when I was able to understand that I needed to re-educate myself and then to really dive headfirst into that process. And I did. I mean, I
Yeah.
completely re-educated myself to where I know what I'm talking about. If we talk about the history and the current situation, I've got an awareness about it.
All right, so let's
So, I
shift
mean,
gears. I really
yeah,
want to talk to you about the fallout for you and maybe even your family in the community. Talk to us about that, because that's got to be intense.
yeah. Well, the first major incident that I had was I had a local rabbi who was stalking my home for a while, and he had a big dog, and I'd see him standing out in front of my house with this dog on numerous occasions. And then 7 o'clock one Saturday morning, he started shouting "F you" repeatedly, screaming F
Jeez.
bombs at
F
my
bombs.
house.
What, right like from the driveway, or was he on your property?
From the sidewalk in front of my house.
Okay,
I mean, we're in a suburb with pretty small lots, so
got it.
the driveways maybe 15 feet in front of my front door. Okay,
Got it.
the sidewalk where he stood. So he's standing in front of my house, screaming F bombs. My daughter is 6 years old. She's woken up. My wife is woken up from her sleep, and we've got this idiot shouting F bombs. And I had him charged with criminal harassment, and he later wrote a public apology in exchange for my drop in the charge. But I've been followed home on numerous occasions. I've had, I mean, the kinds of insults. I mean, you know, from calling me an anti-Semitic Jew, a self-hating Jew, a capo. That's one that they love.
Mm.
Somebody recently strategically placed shit right in the middle of my lawn. I don't think a dog would have chosen that spot. I mean, it was clearly placed there. Somebody threw a bottle of piss at my car. I've had, I fly a Palestinian flag in front of my house, and it's been stolen numerous times. I just replace it when that happens. I've had bumper stickers ripped off my car. I've had bumper stickers sprayed over with black spray paint on my car. I've had my car keyed. So it's pretty often that really nasty things happen. And I've had really awful things written about me in letters to the editor, and I actually had to file a suit at one point against a letter writer and a local newspaper. And the newspaper actually settled with me, so it was a legitimate case.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. It's like it doesn't really penetrate. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't hurt me. It makes me appalled at my people specifically, but at humanity generally, that we're not more mature than this as a species, that this is going on. I mean, at times it gets scary, and my wife and daughter were scared, and I'm sorry about that. I mean, that's not something that I wanted to bring to them.
Right. Dude, that's a lot. That's a lot, man. That's a lot. And you know what? The fact that you've got the resilience to power through that, where most people would probably just be like, you know what? I can't deal with this. I'm just done. That shows your conviction, man. That shows your conviction to what you believe in.
But you know what? You know who's got it a lot worse than me?
The Palestinians.
Every last person in Gaza has it worse than me. Okay?
Yeah. Okay? Absolutely.
And people on the West Bank have it worse than me. Okay. So it's like what I'm going through is nothing compared to what my people are putting them through. that's a little perspective, you know. So go ahead, call me a capo. You think I care? You know what a capo is?
No, just like a
Okay.
traitor or something.
No. So back during the days of the Nazis and the Holocaust, there were Jewish ghettos, in particular the Warsaw Ghetto, where able-bodied young men were put in charge of the ghetto inmates, or were put in charge at at Auschwitz and other what word am I looking for?
Concentration camps, like concentration
Yes.
camps.
So right, that's the word I'm looking for. So there were young able-bodied men who were put in charge of the populations in the concentration camps, and they were answering to the Nazi soldiers. So they were in a way assisting the Nazis. So they were considered to be traitors to the Jewish people. So they call me a capo now because I'm a traitor. And that they love that. And because they love it in particular because it's a word that they can use, and non-Jews don't know what it means, but they know that I know what it means.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. All right, Rich. Listen, man, it's a pleasure to meet you, man. Dude, you got some.
Well, the pleasure's mine.
You've got some balls, dude. You've got some balls, man. You got some balls of steel, dude. Oh,
Cojones.
Cojones. There you go. Exactly.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take care.
I hope you're satisfied with what we got.
100%. And it's just the beginning.
Okay,
it's
cool.
just the beginning. All right,
Cool.
bud. Take care.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.